Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
You're seeing kind of this emergence of augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, and these devices that are enabling these immersive experience. And what we're going to see over the next decade is going to be the new device in which people experience both products and experience payments in a frictionless way.
That was Cleveland Brown, the CEO of Payscout, and he is our special guest this week. This is episode 63 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. And hey, before we get started, if you happen to office in Houston, Austin, or North Texas, check out Fuse Workspace, where their mission is to help others do more. Check them out at fuseworkspace.com. Okay, back to the show. Cleveland grew up in San Jose, California, with Apple and IBM being in his backyard. Cleveland went to college at UCLA and majored in philosophy and business economics. While in college, he started a company building e-commerce platforms and software for public school systems. Payscout is a payment technology company that builds proprietary solutions designed to increase conversions, enhance compliance, and reduce processing costs, focused on highly regulated e-commerce sectors like medical billing, healthcare, cross-border, education, and enterprise-level entities. The culture at Payscout is what differentiates the company, having won multiple awards for being the best place to work. According to Cleveland, one of the trends that is coming in our space is payments and immersive experiences like virtual reality or augmented reality. Cleveland has a passion for building the best culture at Payscout. He also gave us some great advice for those just joining our industry. We've got a great episode today, so let's get started. Hi, Cleveland. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we start by you telling the audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Sure. I grew up in San Jose, California, so I'm a product of the Bay Area. And I tell everyone, literally, Apple and IBM, those were in my backyard and I think part of my DNA in my journey and career. And I began actually on the financial side of payments. And that was it's going back quite a ways, but I worked in banking at the time. Just to put some dates on it, we were using high density floppy disks to install the first at-home banking platforms, kind of a process that would ultimately enable the automated bill payment at the time through dial-up modems. And, from a school perspective, I left the Bay Area. I went to UCLA, majored in philosophy and business economics. And while I was there, that's really when that entrepreneurial spirit kicked in and started one of my first companies. And we were building e-commerce platforms for public schools, K through 12. Public school system's interesting because it's a regulated sector, and spent time building software for public schools. Really, our goal at that time was to build out communication systems and e-commerce platforms to tie the parents into the schools, and had a lot of success in the Bay Area. Started to grow from there. We picked up Los Angeles Unified School District as a customer, so moved back to Los Angeles. So I'm going to go back a little bit. So after UCLA, I started that business, moved to the Bay Area to build it, then picked up Los Angeles Unified School District and spent time really building out the platform, and ultimately became a national platform, which I sold. And what was happening at the time is really, I noticed a big transition into e-commerce and kind of shifted my lens from just schools and e-commerce domestically to internationally. So I really wanted to shift my focus to the globalization of payments and spend some time, traveled abroad to consult at the government level. And it was a natural progression to apply what I was doing in public schools really to the international e-commerce sector as well. So I started to build technology that particular time, really tying in consumers, merchants, and financial institutions to enable global transaction processing in kind of highly regulated scenarios. And that's when I formed Payscout International. Fast forward a few years, I partnered with Manpreet Singh in 2011. What we decided to use was a payments model that blended both domestic and global e-commerce merchant payment solutions, and then kind of build regulatory technology designed to optimize compliance. That's kind of where we're at today.
Okay. And you're currently living where?
Currently living in Los Angeles, California.
Awesome. Okay. So you started to talk a little bit about it, but let's dig in deeper to Payscout. So tell the audience exactly what Payscout does.
So we're a payment technology company. And what we do is we build proprietary solutions, and they're designed to increase conversions, enhance compliance, and reduce processing costs for our customers. And we focus on highly regulated e-commerce sectors. And those sectors include medical billing, healthcare, cross-border commerce, education, which I talked a little bit about earlier, and really enterprise level entities. And what we do is we provide both the financial backbone needed to function in these spaces, but also the technology platform to grow and expand their businesses. But we really help businesses understand payments through a different lens. Payments has been something we feel it's looked at as highly commoditized. However, with the right tools, analytics, platform, and partner, it actually becomes a profit center rather than a cost center. And that's really, our fundamental focus with businesses we work with.
Okay. So was there a reason you picked the highly regulated industry? Did you just feel there was a gap in the market there?
Yes. There's definitely a gap, but I kind of fell into it. As I said earlier, one of the first businesses that I started, it morphed from a nonprofit. It went to a for-profit, but it was working in the public school sector. So I spent a lot of time building out these platforms for public schools. And many people may or may not know that when you're dealing with public, it's highly regulated, both on a federal level and state level. We couldn't just really build technology and say, okay, let's process payments, let's communicate. There's so many regulations that you have to build into the technology that aren't seen to the consumers or customers to make sure that the school is operating in a compliant fashion. So for me, it was just a natural evolution of where I started and where I'm at today.
Okay. And how big is the company?
Currently, we have just over 70 employees. We have offices here in Los Angeles, New Jersey, in Europe, and Brazil. And that covers our global solution.
Okay. So it is a global solution. Roughly how many countries can you work in?
We can work in any country. So we have 189 countries that we can build into a solution for our customers. However, we're highly focused on Brazil, highly focused on Europe, highly focused on China. Those are where our strengths lie, but we can function in any environment. At the time, as I said, I was traveling abroad, doing a lot of consulting, looking at the impact of e-commerce and technology in different countries. At that particular time, decided to really focus on the BRIC nations in terms of how they were expanding and how their consumer was becoming more sophisticated, both financially as well as technically, and really making sure that those consumers were available to U.S. merchants.
Okay. And it sounds like it started more on the e-commerce side, but are you also doing, retail type of things these days too?
We do a very small amount of retail. What we do in retail will usually fold into what we call our multi-channel solution. So what we kind of evolve with, usually with our customers, some of our customers are e-commerce focused, however, need a card present environment. And what we do is we integrate multi-channel. So not just retail from a card present perspective, but mobile perspective. We deal in mixed realities, augmented realities, virtual reality. So basically anywhere commerce takes place, it's our goal to make sure payments and transactions can happen.
Okay. What would you say differentiates your company from your competitors out there?
Gosh, there's going to be a few levels. So I'll start very high level. It's fundamentally the culture that we built that differentiates us. We have a codified, well-defined culture, really built on a specific vision, mission, cultural attributes, and beliefs that really permeate throughout our organization and has really allowed us to be successful. And just to give a little insight to that, we were ranked number 17 for our best workplace in the US. In addition, when that was broken down to financial services, we were ranked number 1 in the United States. So the first thing that I wanted to do is, coming from a financial background, is I really wanted to focus on the reputation of our business, really building out integrity and trust through innovation. That's what's really compelled us to build out our proprietary technology. It inherently changes the lens to look at our customers, to help them. How do we increase conversions? How do we enhance compliance? How do we reduce costs? And as I said before, there's providers in our space and all they think about are cutting costs. And that approach, we don't believe, is sufficient. So it's the culture, one, and then that culture driving into our innovation. And fundamentally, my role is I spend a lot of time in DC. I spend a lot of time with regulators across the board, whether it's the OCC, the U.S. Department of Treasury, the White House, Congress, Senate, just across the board, to really understand and help build a bridge with payments to regulatory concerns and being able to implement what we call the 4 E's in that environment. And that's really education, enablement, and that's what Payscout is. We're a payment enabler, enforcement, and evolution. And I think that differentiates us, is that we have a very, very strong bridge to really help our customers in a regulated environment.
Okay. Where do you see payments heading, say, in the next 2 to 3 years? What are the trends? What's going to happen in our industry, say, over the next 2 to 3 years?
We have a change in leadership. So that always will dictate what's going to happen in payments. So what I see is the next 2 to 3 years will be a very compliance-heavy time period in our space. With the new administration, there's going to be a focus on regulatory activity, I think, across a broad array of financial services, and payments will definitely be impacted. So really a focus on compliance. You're also going to see, I believe, the emergence of the international consumer, as I talked about earlier. And you're going to really see that, I think, coming out of China and Asia. There's a massive and growing opportunity, I believe, for U.S. domestic businesses to tap these markets by enabling payment systems that are friendly to these regions. You know, you take a payment brand like China UnionPay, which they call UnionPay now. You know, it's over 7 billion cards issued worldwide. So I think we're going to see a trend of more sophisticated global consumers wanting to purchase from U.S. businesses. As I said, we're going to see a time period where we need to focus on compliance. And I'd say the last piece of that is that laser focus on multi-channel payment presentation. And that means, you know, across all platforms, building an experience for customers that works in that multi-channel environment.
Yeah. Do you think, being that you're focused on e-commerce maybe more so than other channels, do you feel like this huge shift over to e-commerce that's happened and really been driven by, you know, the COVID pandemic, do you feel like that is going to swing back to where it was, or a little bit? I mean, we've got people that I talk to, they always give the example, my mother never bought anything online and now she buys everything online. Is she going to go back to the way she was before? What are your thoughts on that?
So absolutely not. This is something that I believe has fast forward the evolution in payments. You'll see obviously some return to those environments, but absolutely, I think people, they understand, have a better understanding of these multi-channels, e-commerce, mobile commerce. They, I believe, trust in it much more. I think that was one of the deterrents really trusting how secure the environment is. And I think people are seeing that. So we're not going to go back to that. In fact, what we've done is we fast forward probably, I would say, 2 to 3 years in terms of where e-commerce and even longer term, if you want to discuss that as well, or where I believe commerce is ultimately headed.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Get the old crystal ball out and see where we're headed in the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, so interesting enough. So let me back up just a little bit. One of the things that when I think about payments, so if we're going to pull out that crystal ball, as you said, we really have to quickly think about the history of payments. And the way I look at payments, it's very organic. And payments are what I feel is kind of the connective tissue. And it allows people of all cultures, ages, religions to build economic and social networks throughout the world. Let's go back in time. And we had the Roman trade. And what really changed commerce was the Roman abacus. We had the Silk Road in Asia, which fundamentally changed how commerce and payments were done. We had the Maya exchange systems, Amsterdam Dutch cashiers, Visa, MasterCard building out plastic. And we're now seeing this e-commerce phenomenon. And these are all, I feel, mechanisms that help civilizations kind of really fast forward. And everything that I kind of talked about are frictionless ways to conduct business. So something that we did here at Payscout, and we talk about innovation next 10 years, is we were the first company in the world to execute payments in what we call immersive experiences, in specifically virtual reality. So as I look over the next 10 years, you're seeing kind of this emergence of augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, and these devices that are enabling these immersive experience. And what we're going to see, I believe, this over the next decade is going to be the new device in which people experience both products and experience payments in a frictionless way. So that's, if I'm going to, and this is something that we've already actually spun out of Payscout. So we have a sister company called Cyberdyne. We successfully raised capital for that, and that's moving on its own path. But the growth and expansion in that area is something that we're going to see. And the reason for that is that, once again, we look at payments through conversions. How are more people going to convert? Well, they're going to convert in this immersive environment, making sure that compliance is built, security and safety as you bring these new devices that are tracking what your eyes do, providing feedback to customers in a very unique way, and giving them opportunities for growth and expansion. So that's from a technical perspective. I hate to be long-winded there, but I do see these immersive technologies as the future. And that's going to even bring closer, I believe, the global consumer over the next 10 years, and consumers being able to purchase all over the world.
So I'm just intrigued by the whole virtual reality. And what's an example of that where a payment would be made in that environment?
There's a number. So let's talk about our initial payment. So when we initially launched our first experience and payment in virtual reality, it was for the retail sector specifically. It was a women's fitness sportswear line. And what we did is we had built a brand experience with one of the influencers / model for the retail brand, and then built out a virtual store environment that connected all of their 2D assets. And we took those 2D assets and put them in a 3D environment. And this was done with either a cardboard or a Go at the time. And basically you can just download an app, open the app, pop the app into the device, and you're able to experience that brand, navigate their products, and with your eyes, with a gaze, select what you want to purchase. Look at, everything from the stitching of the clothing up close as if it were in front of you. Look at it on different models, and you're able to purchase in that environment. And we did that in partnership with Visa. That's one example. Another example, something we're working on now in the travel and tourism space, look at, give you an example, cruise ships. What we're doing is building experiences for people that have purchased a cruise. They can download the app, go into their ship, navigate the ship before they get on it in a 3D environment. They can experience what's called shore excursions, as an example, swimming with turtles, dolphins, things of that nature. And then they're able to select those excursions after experiencing them before they even set foot on the ship. So that's another example of payments and immersive technology.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I do think the industry's headed that way. So it's really interesting. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. You've talked about this a little bit already, but tell us about your journey and exactly how you got to be the CEO of Payscout.
Wow. So I would back up to really great examples within my family, from my grandfather to my uncle. My grandfather started a very successful ad agency, still in operation today. My uncle took over, he's sold it, started a new one, and just really, they've done really well in that space. So I grew up spending time at their agency, having exposure to leadership in business at a young age. I think it added to my passion and fuel for entrepreneurship. And, ultimately being a CEO, being a leader, I think they've always been part of my life. So I would say the journey began at a very young age. I've always known that I've had the confidence that I can lead a company through their examples and through seeing their failures, which they were very forthcoming in terms of areas they could have improved, and kind of implementing that into my journey. So as that evolved to Payscout, I think I touched base on it a little bit earlier. I think one of the things that I recognized early on is that there's that cliche that you're only good as your team, but I played athletics and coach as well. And it's really important to have a culture that allows you to recruit, retain, and grow a talent. And that's where the focus was as I started with Payscout, and led to, I think, some success as a CEO. And, my job, I always say my job is twofold. Number one is to create great decision makers. And we hire people based on them being a rock star in what they do. However, we give them the freedom to make decisions utilizing our culture as a backbone, and giving them the ability to be entrepreneurial in their journey with us. And I believe that creates great decision making. And the second piece of that is my job is to inspire and be inspired. And that's through example. So we built a culture of inspiration by volunteering in our communities, learning about ideas and issues that permeate our society, and bring light to that. And we try to make a change where we can, because we believe every individual has a social responsibility to make the world a better place. So that's really, I think, my journey, and it's going to continue to be my journey. And I'm inspired by the people that I work with. I'm inspired by so much, and I try to bring that inspiration out and inspire others as well.
That's great. So what are you passionate about? So maybe pick one work-related thing and one maybe non-work-related thing that you're passionate about.
When it comes to work, I'm passionate about the culture of the business. I'm passionate about being the best and having the best culture that can attract people of all ages. And more importantly, I love being able to mentor the youth. I'm passionate about that. I spend time guest lecturing at UCLA, Cal State Northridge, number of other areas, and really not just teaching people about payments, but teaching them about culture in business. And then how does payment relate to that? I'm very passionate about delivering that message, and delivering that message across the board. And as I think I talked a little bit about DC, I'm passionate about building that bridge, that cultural bridge to regulators, because, regulators and businesses really look at things through a different lens. I'm passionate about that bridge.
Okay. So you brought up a good segue into the next question when you mentioned mentoring young people. I've been in this industry 15 years or so and certainly just fell into it. It wasn't like I seeked out the payments industry, but I think that's changed. I think college courses today on fintech and different places, and there's a lot of investment in this industry, a lot of businesses and places for people that are coming right out of school can go to work, and I think there's a lot of excitement about the industry. What would your advice be to someone, say, coming right out of college that wants to get into payments? What would you tell them to do so that they had a successful career?
So the first thing I would tell someone listening, I would say, know who you are. Spend time understanding, knowing yourself. Know what you stand for. If you don't know, begin with challenging yourself to define answers to those questions. And the best way to do that is to identify a mentor if you're struggling, how to define those things. If you have a strong foundation, and that foundation is rooted in a vision, a mission, cultural attributes, and a belief, I believe that you'll be successful in this or any sector. So that's the first piece of advice I would give. The second would be in regards to payments. And this would be any sector, but payments specifically, is I would tell that young person is to play the long game. Understand that success comes from the grind, and it's a daily grind, and you have to embrace that. There are people in our space, as you know, being in it for the last 15 years, that have short-term aspirations, right? And within those short-term aspirations, they want to make a buck, let the chips fall where they may. That's not the right approach. If you're committed to payments long-term, fintech long-term, that means that you're committed to developing innovative solutions. You're committed to understanding compliance requirements. You're committed to building a standard in financial technology and in payments. And that fundamentally will become a key part of your value proposition. And I think that's very, very important for young people, is to have a value proposition. Define what you're going to bring to payments, how you're going to bring it, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Because ultimately, when we're hiring or they're in front of customers, there's going to be understanding and respect towards that individual, that they're really thinking about building a business, building themselves professionally, and building out the payment sector to leave a legacy for the people that follow them. So I think that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, I think that's all very, very good advice. Well, we've covered a lot of ground about you, the company, the industry. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good. I guess the one note I would say to you that I'm glad that you brought up in our conversation, you just brought up the key to the future of payments, and that's just young people and youth, and making sure that we commit ourselves, being in the industry as long as we have, to really going out and promoting our industry to the youth, because I think that's where the future ultimately lies. And I'm inspired by the ideas and the things that they're going to bring to us and bring to the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Cleveland, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know your time's very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me, Greg, and thank you again.
Thank you. And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.